Marketing is essential for any business because the right marketing puts you in front of customers who can bring in revenue for your business. So that's why we're going to talk about how do we create the type of marketing plan that allows you to experience the type of growth you want in your business. Our guest who joins us today is the founder of CJL Consulting, and she supports clients by creating beverage marketing and training programs for the likes of Alamo Drafthouse, American Social, Arcis Golf, Drive Shack, and Flagship Restaurant Group, among others. She's also the host of the Lawler Out Loud podcast, where it's a weekly podcast featuring trendsetters and newsmakers around the hospitality industry. So our guest who joins us is none other than Christie Lawler. Christie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
It's a pleasure, Christie, to have you on Breakthrough Success. And with any business, you are thinking of how can I get more visibility in front of more customers, and the marketing plan is a key element. And wondering for businesses who maybe they haven't done a marketing plan in a while or just haven't seen results, where do you suggest we start when creating that plan?
I don't think that there's honestly any kind of hard and fast rule on where to start. I think it depends on where you want to go. And so when I take on a new client, when I start assessing their needs, I start by working backwards. I ask them what their end vision is, short term and long term, and distant future if they have an idea. And then I work backwards to create the steps to get them to each benchmark along the way. Because as you know, it's not an overnight process. It is constantly evolving, and it can be tedious or arduous at times. But I try to create something that is completely customized to every single client.
And there is definitely that customizable approach. And Christie brings up a great point. Think about where you want to go first and create the marketing plan around that. And how detailed do you suggest we get on these? I know it's custom, but the idea is that some people get too detailed and others don't get detailed enough.
Well, I think that there's a simplicity in the approach of creating that backwards outline, because you can get to certain pivot points in the process and decide which ones you can flesh out further. And you can create something that is very large scale that can be taken down into the sum of its parts, and you do each individual metric. In some areas, you may decide you kind of want to pull back on some of it because it's a little too much too soon. And the key to successful marketing is getting that buy-in from the team members that are going to be implementing the vision and getting them on board. I mean, if they're not all on the same page, nothing is going to work, no matter how brilliant the strategy. So my approach is always, you can always scale up. It's harder to scale backwards, but make sure that what you're doing is following a logical path to create the buy-in at every step of the way so that no one gets lost.
And it's important, as Christie mentions, figure out who's doing what in your marketing plan. If it's just you in your marketing plan, figure out when you're going to do certain things. Like, do you do this objective this week? Do you do the next one next week? Like, how do you incorporate those? That's something you need to think about when it comes to your marketing plan. And I mean, just this idea of coming out with a plan, implementing it. How long do you usually give a plan before you go a little back to the drawing board, or even just scrap the whole thing and go all over again?
You know, that's also contingent on the client. You can tell immediately it's not only the plan and the deliverables that are part of it. It comes down to how you are relaying the information. If it's one of those things where leadership is telling people this is what's going to happen, and they're not listening to feedback or input from the people that are going to be implementing it, that can create its own set of challenges, and it may not work. What I've seen to be the best strategy is to involve people during the decision process, because I prefer to be a member of the team and not just a supplier with my clients. I prefer to work with them to constantly be asking those questions to make sure that I'm hitting their targets and that I'm understanding their various need states. Because there's never been a marketing plan that I've put into place that is followed, to the letter. It's constantly just something that we're changing, developing, and good ideas along the way, because they're doing it every day. And if you're not listening to those people that are on the team, it doesn't matter who you hire to put it into place.
We've got more great content coming up in this episode, but first we have a message from our sponsor. So, do you know someone who repeatedly gets stuck and hurt in relationships and doesn't know what to do? Dr. David Simonson helps people to get unstuck so they can heal from their hurt and create new positive ways to embrace relationships. Dr. David is an expert in family therapy, couples therapy, emotional intimacy, and more. You can get in touch with him over at davidsimonson.net to learn more about his work and see if he can help. That link will be in the show notes of this episode. Anyways, let's get right back into the episode. And you mentioned something interesting where the marketing plan isn't going to get followed perfectly. And that's where you get some people to think, well, I'm not going to follow it. I know what my main goal is. Why would I even go ahead and create a detailed marketing plan? So what would you say to that group of people?
Well, typically quite a bit of research and study goes into these strategies well before they get to the point of implementation. So there is a certain level of trust, but I recommend to leadership when they're implementing, especially the larger the strategy and the more moving parts it has, the more you need to really listen to the team members that are helping you along the way, because they may bring up a point that no one else thought of. And there is value in that. But if they're just saying no to say no because they're resistant to change, then maybe you need to understand where they're coming from a different perspective. And they might not be a fit culturally, or they could have a really good reason. Who knows? But if you don't ask, you don't learn.
And asking is just so vital for figuring out what people you need to focus on more, who could be a bad fit. And this brings up the idea of bottleneck, because you have a plan, you have implementation, it could be going really well, but there are bottlenecks along the journey. And sometimes it's the founder who is the bottleneck because of the desire to make things perfect. So how can we identify bottlenecks and clear those up quickly?
Well, they're usually pretty obvious in my experience when somebody is creating that little stop in the process. It's usually very clear who it is, and usually they're pretty vocal about what the challenges are, especially if it's an owner-based challenge. There's trouble in reworking the wheel, because sometimes they may be under that perception of, I've been doing it wrong and now someone's telling me I'm doing it wrong. And it's not that they were doing anything wrong. It's that they had been doing so many different things for so long that they needed fresh eyes, fresh ideas. Sometimes you can bring someone in from the outside that isn't a part of your business and isn't a part of your culture, and they can help you see things through the eyes of your consumer, which changes the game if you're understanding. But usually if you just provide the data and the research that helped you reach these concepts, then there's usually less resistance once there's actual proof. Like, I didn't just pull this out of the air. Here's why I came up with this strategy. They're usually more amenable to change.
And that's a great thing to always go back to, like the why. Like, I know when we usually say why, it's like, figure out your purpose, like what drives you. But the why for like each part of the strategy is also like just as important from a business standpoint, because it's one thing to say, grow on YouTube, start a podcast, but then we get into why and we're like, oh, that makes sense. And just being able to have the reasoning behind all parts of your plan makes it easier for you to implement and the people on your team.
Absolutely. That's an excellent point. Couldn't have said it better myself.
And I know that you help people with their marketing plans. You help people who they want to accelerate their businesses. So For people who want to follow your working journey, where would we go?
You know, the easiest place to find us is either via our website, which is CJL Consults, that's plural.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Christie Lawler.
We will have those links in the show notes for everyone who wants to follow Christie and her work. But once again, thank you so much for joining us on Breakthrough Success. It was a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it.